The hotel was called Tranquility, a name that didn't match its reality at all. The old building stood at the end of a narrow street. At night, the weak yellow glow of its lamps spilled faintly across the cobblestones. When the wind blew, the tall windows creaked, as if the building itself were alive and quietly sighing. Alice remembered her first night shift clearly. A light rain was falling. The lobby was unnaturally silent. The hotel manager, a middle-aged man with gray hair and a calm voice, said only one thing before leaving. "This place has its own rules. If you respect them, it won't harm you." Alice didn't take his words seriously. The night shift was usually quiet. The wall clock ticked steadily. Tick, tock. The dim lights cast long shadows across the floor. Alice sat behind the reception desk and checked the room list on the system. Most rooms were occupied, but next to room 313, there was a red X. No explanation, no note. When she asked a coworker why the room was closed, she was told it was broken and never used. Still, Alice noticed something strange. Room 313 was never on the cleaning schedule. Its key was never replaced, and despite being closed, it never truly felt empty. 3 weeks later, on another calm night, the hotel door opened. A pale man carrying an old suitcase stepped into the lobby. His voice was soft, polite. "I'm not registered," he said. "I'm looking for an available room." Alice checked the system. Everything was full. At that exact moment, something changed. The red X next to room 313 vanished. The word "available" appeared. Alice's heart began to race. She hesitated. "There are no vacant rooms," she said. The man smiled, calm, confident. "You're mistaken," he replied. "Room 313 is free." The air in the lobby grew cold, and against her better judgment, Alice handed him the key. The key was heavy, cold, colder than the others. When it touched the desk, it made a dull sound, as if it had struck something deeper than wood. The man took the key. "Thank you," he said. Then, quietly, like always, he walked toward the stairwell. The elevator didn't work for him. It never did, for guests of room 313. That night, at 2:43 a.m., the reception phone rang. Alice answered. "Tranquility Hotel." Silence. Seconds passed. Then a quiet voice whispered, "The room is cold." Alice swallowed. "What room number?" she asked. A long pause. "You already know." The call ended. On the phone display, 313. The next morning, the man was gone. The system showed the room as checked out. Alice went to the third floor with a housekeeper. The woman stopped in front of the room. "I won't clean this room," she said. "Why?" Alice asked. "The guests in this room," the woman replied, "take care of everything themselves." The door opened. The room was perfect. No suitcase, no signs of life. Only a small piece of paper on the pillow. "Thank you for your hospitality." Alice stared at the handwriting. She recognized it. It was her own. The nights continued. Guests arrived without reservations. They always took room 313. They were polite. They arrived at night and vanished by morning. Slowly, things in the hotel began to change. In an old staff photograph, a woman appeared, wearing a vintage uniform. She looked just like Alice. On the shift schedule, Alice's name was listed as the permanent night receptionist. She had never agreed to that. Alice began having the same dream every night. She sat behind the reception desk. The lobby was empty. No exit. Only a long corridor. At the end of it, room 313. The door opened slowly. A calm voice spoke. "It's your turn." She woke up every time with her heart pounding. One night at 3:13 a.m., Alice decided to learn the truth. She took the spare key. The third-floor hallway was darker than ever. The lights shut off, one by one, behind her. She stood in front of the door. There was no number on it anymore. She turned the key and stepped inside. The room was the lobby, the same desk, the same clock, the same weak yellow light. Behind the desk sat a young woman. She wore an old receptionist's uniform. She looked up, smiled. "You finally came." The clock ticked once. Time stopped. 2:43. The next morning, Nora arrived for her shift. Alice sat behind the desk, silent, a faint smile on her face. Nora checked the system. Room 313. Occupied. Permanent. The Tranquility Hotel breathed quietly once again, as if the room that was never empty had finally found its new owner.
The hotel was old, and its mirrors were even older. Large, full-length mirrors covered the lobby walls. Dark golden frames, glass that rippled slightly, stretching reflections just enough to feel wrong. The staff always said the mirrors had seen everything. Guests, arrivals, departures, and nights that were never written in the records. Adrian, the night receptionist, laughed at those stories. He believed everything had a simple explanation, even fear. That night, the lobby was quiet as usual. The lights reflected softly on the marble floor. Reflections drifted slowly inside the mirrors. Adrian stood behind the reception desk, watching the clock, when the hotel door opened. A man entered, tall, wearing a dark coat, a face without a clear age. His voice was calm, measured. "I don't have a reservation," he said, "but I only need a room for one night." Adrian lowered his gaze to check the system, but before he did, something made him glance at the mirror ahead. He saw himself, the desk, the lights, but not the man. His brow tightened. Maybe the angle was wrong. He looked again, still nothing. The space where the man stood was empty in the glass. Adrian looked up. The man stood directly in front of him, real, still, expressionless. "Welcome," Adrian said, forcing his voice to stay normal. The system showed one available room. He handed over the key. As the key touched the desk, Adrian glanced at the mirror again. His own hand was there. The key was not. It was as if the key itself refused to exist in the glass. The man thanked him. "Good night," he said. When he walked away, the lobby felt colder.
Minutes later, Adrian scolded himself. Fatigue, imagination. Still, every time he passed the mirrors, he searched for the man's reflection. He never found it. Near midnight, Adrian went upstairs for a routine walk. On the second floor, he stopped in front of a hallway mirror. He saw himself standing there, but behind him, where the hallway should have continued, there was only darkness. Soft footsteps sounded behind him. He turned. The man was there, approaching silently. "I'm looking for the elevator," the man said. Adrian pointed the way. When he looked back at the mirror, only he remained. That was when Adrian understood. The mirrors did not only show who was there, they revealed who was not. In the morning, Adrian told a coworker about a guest without a reflection. The coworker stared, then shrugged. "Strange people come here all the time," he said. "Don't think too much about details." But when they checked the guest registry, the man's name was there, written in an old hand. No check-in date, no checkout date. The following night, the man appeared again in the lobby. Same clothes, same face, same calm voice. Before Adrian could speak, the man said, "Don't worry, not all of us are meant to be seen." Adrian tried to ask something. The man turned toward the mirrors. He stood before one of them. The glass reflected the lobby, reflected Adrian, but the space where the man stood was empty. The man took one step forward and entered that emptiness. No sound, no crack, only the mirror grew slightly darker. The next morning, Adrian never came to work. The staff said he must have quit. That night, the new receptionist stood behind the desk. In the mirror ahead, a man stood beside him, wearing the hotel uniform with a familiar face. When the receptionist turned around, no one was there. Only a calm voice echoed through the lobby. Some people live only in mirrors, and some only outside them. Nights at the hotel always fell silent early, as if the building had learned to hold its breath before darkness. Brian, the night receptionist, sat behind the front desk listening to sounds that had become familiar. The steady ticking of the wall clock, the soft wind brushing the tall windows, and the occasional groan of the elevator rising and falling like a metallic sigh. He liked the silence, a silence that allowed him to think, or sometimes not think at all. The first night the phone rang, nothing felt unusual. The clock read 2:17 a.m. Brian answered, as he always did. "Hotel reception?" On the other end, there was nothing. No breathing, no static, not even the sound of a call ending. A few seconds later, the line went dead. Brian placed the receiver back. A wrong number, he told himself. A tasteless joke. The second night, at the exact same time, the phone rang again. This time, Brian looked at the clock first. The hands rested on the same numbers, as if they had been waiting. He answered. Silence. When the call ended, Brian felt it for the first time. Something was wrong. He wrote in the incident log, "Silent call, 2:17 a.m.," and tried not to think about it. But the calls continued. Every night, same minute, no sound, always brief. Brian began to feel anxious before the hour arrived. Sometimes he watched the clock early, sometimes too late. It didn't matter. The hands always reached 2:17, and the phone rang. A few nights later, he decided not to answer. When the phone rang, he only stared at it. After a few seconds, it stopped. Then it rang again, louder, longer. Brian took a slow breath and picked up. This time, a quiet voice spoke. "Why didn't you answer?" Brian froze. The voice was his own, same tone, same pauses, same late-night exhaustion. Before he could speak, the call ended. The lobby sank back into silence. From that night on, Brian stopped trusting the sounds. The wall clock sometimes lagged, then rushed forward, but it always stopped at 2:17. One night, the phone rang once, even after it had been unplugged. Brian began having dreams. He dreamed he sat at the desk. The phone rang. He answered, and his own voice whispered urgently, "Don't answer, just hang up." But his hand did not listen. One sleepless night in the hotel's old storage room, Brian found a dust-covered notebook. On its cover, faded letters read, "Calls." He flipped through the pages. Every few years, a name appeared. Beside each name, only one number, 2:17. Some names were crossed out, some were not. Next to the last name, just before his own, a single word was written, "Answered." Brian closed the notebook. The air felt colder. The next night, Brian decided to leave before 2:17. He put on his coat, turned off the desk lamp, placed the key on the counter. As his hand touched the door handle, the phone rang. The clock still had minutes left. Brian stopped. The phone rang again, and this time, without being answered, a soft voice filled the lobby. "You're late." Brian turned back toward the desk. The receiver lifted slowly, as if held by an unseen hand. Brian's voice came from the phone. "Hotel reception?" He tried to scream. No sound came. The seconds fell, one by one. The clock advanced. The hands stopped. 2:17. The phone fell silent. Everything looked normal again, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, the day receptionist entered the lobby. Everything was neat. The incident log lay open. The last name written was unfinished, just a B followed by a trembling line. No one saw Brian leave the hotel. That night, the phone did not ring. Only the wall clock moved forward, waiting for 2:17.
The guest ledger always rested at the reception desk. A thick book, bound in dark leather, its edges worn, smelling of old paper. Emily, the night receptionist, often wondered why the hotel still kept it, despite the computerized system. The manager had only said, "Some things are better written on paper." Emily didn't understand until the night she saw her own name. That evening began quietly. The lobby was empty.
The lights were soft. The wall clock was barely audible. As usual, Emily checked the system, then flipped through the ledger to make sure everything matched. Guest names appeared in different handwritings, some neat, some rushed, some so old the ink had faded. When she reached the page for tomorrow, she stopped. On the last line, her name was written, Emily. Next to it, a room number and a time. The final column, normally reserved for notes or checkout times, was not empty. A date was written there, tomorrow's date. Emily told herself it had to be a mistake. She closed the book, waited, opened it again. Her name was still there, same unfamiliar handwriting, not hers, not anyone else's. As if someone, years ago, had written it with certainty. She tried to ignore it. Hotel nights could play tricks on the mind, but every time she glanced at the ledger, the words seemed darker, newer, as if the ink were fresh. Hours later, a guest arrived, a quiet man. He handed over his documents without a word. Emily entered his information into the system. Then, out of habit, she looked at the ledger. The man's name was already there, not newly written, as if it had always existed and was only now being noticed. Emily's hands went cold. She closed the ledger and gave the man his key. "Thank you," he said. "I hope my stay won't be long." Emily didn't know why, but the words lingered. After midnight, with the lobby completely silent, Emily opened the ledger again. She noticed symbols beside older names. When she followed the dates, she realized something. The crossed-out names were marked with dates that did not match their departures. The ledger wasn't only recording arrivals, it was writing something else, something never spoken aloud. Several pages back, she found the name of a former receptionist, one who had vanished years ago. Beside the name was the same symbol now written next to hers. Emily exhaled slowly. "Stay calm," she told herself. "It's just an old book, full of mistakes, full of imagination." Near dawn, the sound of pages turning came softly from the desk. Emily looked up. The ledger had opened itself, to the same page. Her name was fuller now, more complete. Something had been added to the final column, not written with fresh ink, but as if the words had risen from inside the paper. Emily decided to close the ledger and never open it again. But every time she looked away, she felt someone reading over her shoulder. The hours passed. The date on the wall calendar slowly changed, approaching the date written beside her name. Morning arrived. The day receptionist entered the lobby. Emily, tired but quiet, placed the ledger on the desk. She handed over the shift without explanation. Her coworker glanced at the page. "Why is your name here? Isn't today your day off?" Emily said nothing. She smiled and walked out of the hotel. That evening, when the staff opened the ledger to record new guests, Emily's name was no longer listed among the employees, only in the old book, on a page slightly more yellow than the rest. Her name was written there, complete, neat, uncrossed, as if it had finally found its proper place. The ledger closed softly. The hotel had only 12 floors. Everyone knew that. Guests, staff, even the metal panel beside the elevator, with buttons numbered 1 through 12. Thomas, the night receptionist, had cleaned that panel many times. He knew there was no extra button. And yet, some nights, the elevator behaved as if it were hiding a number. The first time, Thomas noticed the delay. The doors closed. The cabin rose. After floor 12, there was silence. No movement. No vibration. Then the elevator moved again, descending, as if it had forgotten something. Thomas wrote a report. Maintenance said everything was fine. A few nights later, a late guest arrived. He looked tired. "I just want to get to my room," he said. Thomas handed him the key and pressed the elevator button. As the man stepped inside, Thomas saw his hand rise slightly above 12, where no button existed. The man smiled briefly. "Some floors," he said, "only open for those who stay awake at night." The doors closed. The elevator went up. Thomas stared at the display. The numbers changed, one by one, until 12. Then, instead of stopping, the display went dark. When it lit again, a number appeared that should not exist. 13. The cabin stopped. Seconds passed. Then the elevator returned, empty. That night, Thomas could not rest. In the morning, he searched the system. The guest had never checked in. The assigned room was clean, unused, no trace of anyone. Thomas tried to forget. The elevator did not let him. On later nights, it moved by itself, doors opening, closing, no one inside. After 12, the display hesitated. 13 appeared for a blink of an eye, then vanished. Each time, Thomas pretended he had seen nothing, but he felt it. The hotel was showing him something. One night, the power went out for a few seconds. When it returned, the lobby was silent. The elevator stood waiting, doors open. Inside, the light was dim. The buttons glowed softly. Thomas didn't know why, but he stepped inside. The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. 1, 2, 3, up to 12. Then a pause, longer than ever before. Thomas's heart raced. The display went dark. When it lit again, it showed 13. The doors opened. A narrow hallway waited. Like the others, but colder, quieter. The lights were dim. No doors had numbers. Thomas stepped forward. Behind him, the elevator doors closed. He turned. The cabin was gone. Minutes passed, or hours. Time had no meaning. Then a calm voice spoke. Someone must always know this floor. A strange fatigue settled into Thomas. When the doors opened again, he was back in the lobby, behind the reception desk, as if he had never left. The next morning, his coworkers said Thomas had been at the desk all night. He had never stepped away. But when Thomas looked into the lobby mirror, beneath the yellow lights, he saw a shadow, stretched, just slightly longer than his own, as if an extra floor was still following him. The elevator doors closed softly. For a brief moment, the display showed 13, then returned to 12.